The old Dota Allstars maps are full of secrets and surprises, and in the case of 6.77b, a batch of 6 heroes were hidden in the game's data. Unlike the forgotten heroes of the past, these guys were never actually released, and they were developed much later in the game's life cycle. Because of this, their respective skill sets synergize well with each other, and aren't just a random mishmash of janky Warcraft 3 abilities like you'd find in the early Ginsu days. Without further ado, here are even more of Dota's forgotten heroes, 6.77b edition. And don't forget, please follow me on Twitch at Dennis the Tall. Current schedule is Sundays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays from noon to 4 PM Pacific. Can't wait to see you there. Handsome. We have to cover a few things before we talk about the heroes themselves. First off, these heroes were uncovered by Sir Araz of the Play Dota forums, but since the forum has been shut down, I was unable to find the original post. However, other websites have covered the information, and I was able to parse as much as I could from there. Second, these heroes are found on a special version of 6.77b, which accesses them by typing the command -clear in the chat, causing all of them to spawn at the same time, which is why you see all of their icons on the side. Finally, in the map itself, all of the heroes' ability information simply say text, and there's no additional information beyond cooldowns and mana costs, so I will heavily rely on the aforementioned websites for skill information, as well as my own experience fiddling around with them. Plus, anything you see will be presented at the spell's maximum level to preserve my sanity. With all of that out of the way, the first forgotten hero of this batch is the Ghost Revenant. He's a tricky ranged intelligence hero that revolves around the utility of his spells to devastate his enemies. His first spell is Wraith. This puts the Ghost Revenant into an ethereal state, as well as increases movement speed for a set duration. As a reminder, ethereal means that you're immune to physical damage, but you can't auto-attack and take an additional 40% in magic damage. The skill can be cast again to end the ethereal state early, and at max level, the spell's cooldown and duration are the same, so it can be active all the time. Since the Ghost Revenant is more of a spellcaster, this skill naturally allows him to set up more ganks in the early game, as well as position himself better during teamfights. The more physical damage an enemy team does, the better Ghost Revenant performs, as he can stay ethereal for as long as he needs to once he hits max level. His second ability is Blackjack. This fires a skill shot that shoots out 3 orbs that travel parallel to each other, dealing damage and stunning enemy units caught. A fairly straightforward spell, the large AoE makes this good in any situation for trying to catch an enemy. Following this is Miasma. This deals magic damage over time to units in an AoE around the Ghost Revenant. Miasma will also reveal invisible units in the area, making this act like a damaging dust of appearance, and causing the Revenant to be a very hard counter to invisible-based heroes. The Ghost Revenant's ultimate is Exhaustion. This is a global spell that affects all enemy units, and will cause their movement speed to drop to 100 for a few seconds. You can think of this as a reverse Centaur Warrunner ultimate essentially, but its incredible utility makes it easy to set up kills from across the map, arguably more so than other global spells in the game as we know it. Looking at the Ghost Revenant's skills as a whole, it seems like he's more of a counterpick rather than a strong individual hero. His gameplay would be really punishing if a team lacks proper magic damage, or if you run the good old-fashioned Gondar, Riki, Mirana lineup, but otherwise, you're not dealing with anything too special. His ultimate looks really strong though, due to the sheer amount of utility it brings to the table. Catch an enemy for a kill, slow down your enemies so your teammates can flee, set up for bigger teamfight spells like Chronosphere or Ravage. It really has a lot of situations where it can shine. In today's meta, I can see him as a position 4, running Rod of Atos, Yule's Scepter, and Shiva's Guard down the line. Anything that can further disrupt the enemy would be a solid pickup. At the end of the day, this spooky scary specter never did make it into Dota, and it looks as though the Ghost Revenant has ghosted us. Next on the list, we've got the Wyvern Outrider, a ranged agility hero with an assassin-style gameplay and an amazing ultimate for both initiating and disengaging a clash. His first spell is Sonic Boom. This causes him to rush in a straight line to a target location, stunning and damaging all units hit within a small AoE. It's pretty much a mix between Clockwork's Hookshot and Slark's Pounce, as the Outrider will want to use the spell most of the time to pick off an enemy he's chasing down, but you can utilize its long range to escape if necessary. His second ability is Wind Blast. After a short delay, this deals damage in a small AoE, and based off of the coding of the spell, it looks like it scales partially with the hero's agility. Not much else to say. It's good for dishing out a burst of damage, while also acting as a decent farming tool. After this is Wind Barrier. This applies a magic shield to a target ally, as well as increase their attack speed for a short duration. This has some slight synergy with Sonic Boom, as it gives him a little bit of protection after diving into the enemy, and it allows the Outrider to dish out more auto attacks to his target. Although it's not too complicated, this both makes up for his squishy body, in addition to giving him more DPS to do his job well. The Wyvern Outrider's ultimate is Prevailing Winds. This spell causes every unit to be cycloned in a target area. After the cyclones end, any allied units will gain bonus movement speed, while enemy units will suffer a slow. Not to beat a dead horse, but this spell has a great amount of utility and can be used to either start or escape a fight if things get hairy. It's pretty crazy how great this spell is in a teamfight setting, as it provides that initial disable to interrupt channeling spells, and can set up for bigger spells just like with the Ghost Revenant's ultimate. The Wyvern Outrider is a bit on the simple side, but I think he's a good start to a fully fleshed out hero. The agility scaling on his second ability is a pretty interesting way to go, and I have a hunch that an Ethereal Blade Dagon build would be a fun way to play him. Halfway through the list, we've got the Priest. He's a ranged intelligence hero who probably needs some more work put into him. To start it off, we have Holy Shackles. This is a short-range spell that sends out projectiles to the 3 closest enemy units, dealing damage and rooting them for 3 seconds. This spell is near identical to Ember Spirit's Searing Chains, except the damage is done instantly, and the Priest doesn't really have a good way to get close to an enemy without an item. His second ability is named Chill. This is a single target spell that deals magic damage and silences an enemy for about 4 seconds. That's really all there is to it. Kinda boring to be truthful here. After that is Focus. This can be cast on an allied target and gives them a buff that increases their damage by 100 for either 5 auto attacks or 12 seconds, whichever happens first. The unit is slightly slowed during this time, so it's best used on long-range allies. Also, I'm pretty sure this is a bug, but if you cast Focus on an enemy, it damages and silences them just like Chill. So hey, if nothing else, at least he's got an extra nuke he can use. The Priest's ultimate is Divine Intervention. This targets any unit and makes them invulnerable for 6 seconds. However, they won't be able to attack or use spells during this time. His ultimate is a glorified Yule Scepter, allowing you to effectively take out one unit during a team fight. Whether you would use that on an enemy carry or a dying ally is up to you. And there you have it, that's the Priest. He doesn't seem too well thought out, and his skills have fairly little synergy with each other. Is he supposed to go in to ensnare people? Is he supposed to stay back to buff his allies? He's pretty clunky when it comes down to it, and he likely wouldn't have a place in Dota 2. But hey, at least he's got a day job to go back to. Moving on to hero number 4 of 6.77b, we have Dragonhawk the Sissy. So yes, her title is Sissy, and she uses the succubus model, so I'm unsure if this might just be a placeholder, but her voice lines are that of a suave, debonair man.
Ride like the wind. The sky is mine.
There's something wrong with what my Sissy says, indeed. Whatever the case may be, Dragonhawk is a ranged intelligence hero who could have been one of the strongest supports if she made it into the game. Dragonhawk's first spell is Conjure Force. This instantly casts a very large ring around the hero. Enemy units caught in the range will take 300 magic damage and be ensnared for about 3 seconds. What's interesting is that the radius of the spell is strictly the big circle around Dragonhawk. The inner circle has absolutely no effect at all, so you do need to position yourself correctly in order to catch your target. If only there were a spell she could use to, I don't know, thrust enemies to where she wants them? Her next ability is Arcane Seal. This places a debuff on an enemy unit, silencing them and amplifying all damage done to them by 25%. A very useful spell for harassing in the early game, this is a free Orchid Malevolence that can pretty much be a death sentence on a target if your teammates can agree to focus on one person. If the target tries to escape, you can catch them with Conjure Force and deal amplified damage to boot. In Dragonhawk's third spell slot is Thrust. This can target an allied or enemy unit, and it pushes your chosen target away from Dragonhawk. If you use it on an ally, they'll be healed for 300 HP, while an enemy will take 300 damage. It's more or less a free Force Staff, and having something like that early on is incredibly valuable. To clarify, it does differ from Force Staff in the sense that it pushes units away from Dragonhawk instead of propelling the unit forward relative to where they're facing. Unless you cast it on Dragonhawk herself, in which case it acts like a perfectly normal Force Staff. Just a crazy powerful spell in general, this can also be used to push enemies into Conjure Force's circle, and it's a fairly decent nuke on its own, so you can use it to chip down an enemy and push them into your team. Dragonhawk's ultimate is Divine Wrath. This is a 2-part spell that requires some coordination to pull off well. The first part targets an allied hero. Sissy will start channeling, and the targeted ally will be invincible for roughly 6 seconds, kinda similar to the Priest's ultimate. When this part ends, Divine Wrath will turn into the sub-ability, Target Divine Wrath. This will shoot out a nuke in a line that deals damage based on what was blocked in the first part of the spell. If done correctly, not only will you save a friend from death, but the resulting damage is a great way to punish the enemy for throwing all their spells willy-nilly. And honestly, I love the design of this spell. It's a lot like Zarya's shield in Overwatch, and the idea of making a friend invincible makes the spell feel like a huge deal. Imagine using this against the Winter Wyvern ultimate and collecting your free rampage right after. I really like Dragonhawk's design, even if it seems a bit overpowered from first glance, but there's nothing that a few patches couldn't fix. Also, it's interesting to note that in patch 6.78, Oracle was released. Given the similarities between their spells, the root, amplified damage, healing damaging binary, and an ultimate that makes an ally invulnerable, there's a really good chance that Dragonhawk was a prototype for Oracle that was later reconfigured into the hero that we know today. For now, Dragonhawk exists as the blueprint for a powerful support who is anything but a sissy. Now for something a little different, here's the 5th hero, the Mortar Team. The Mortar Team is a ranged strength hero who has a mix of crowd control and long-range sieging potential with his ultimate. Now, cards on the table, I could not get the hero's first 3 spells to work, but here's what we know. Concussive Shot is a spell that's supposed to silence and slow enemy units. When I used it in game, the Mortar Team would do like a reload animation, but there wasn't any follow-up after that. Also a little conjecture on my part, but this ability shares its name with Skywrath Mage's W, so maybe the 2 spells had a similar function. His second spell is called Bomb Bomb, and it's kind of a mystery as to what it's supposed to do. The websites I referenced said it was an unknown skill or incomplete skill. When I clicked on the skill, the cursor changed, and it seemed like a target point ability, but really, that's all we know about it. Next up is Flash Bomb. It looks like the spell was similar to Brewmaster's Drunken Haze, where it would apply a debuff that causes enemies to miss 80% of their attacks on a very short cooldown, but again, it doesn't do anything in-game. Because of that, I'm just going to move straight into the Mortar Team's ultimate, Siege Form. This is a toggleable ability that lets the Mortar Team switch between his base form and Siege Form. Under Siege Form, the movement speed of the hero will be reduced to 100, but their attack damage will be increased by 150, and their attack range will be set to 1500. To give you a frame of reference, Sniper with a max level take aim, the level 25 talent, a Hurricane Pike, and a Ballista is still 60 range shorter than Siege Form. It looks like Mortar Team's attacks splash in this mode as well, making this absolutely awful to deal with. In this form, you also get a command that allows you to target your attacks to the ground, but when I used it, the game crashed. So yeah, they were definitely in the early stages of development. I think the hero has a fun concept, but I can't imagine how playing them would feel. They're pretty crowd control heavy in their base form, but Siege Form takes them completely out of the fight, since you'd want to be hidden away in a safe spot to take care of the enemy. Sounds pretty difficult to balance around, but maybe it's just because we're not ready to engage in mortar combat. Now I'll let you in on a little secret. I've saved my personal favorite hero for last. Edgewalker is a dumb name for this ranged intelligence hero who focuses on messing up the enemies in creative ways. Let's actually start with his 3rd spell, since his gameplay revolves around it quite a bit. Fatal Attraction is a passive ability that triggers every time you use one of Edgewalker's other spells. This will pull units within a certain range closer to the hero, and those affected enemies will take 50 damage. Because of this, it would benefit you a lot to pick up some kind of mobility item to pull the enemy exactly where you want them to be. Moving on from that, his first spell is Death Watch. This places a buff on an allied unit for 10 seconds. If the unit dies, the unit who killed it will take 400 damage and suffer a 3-second stun. Its short cooldown suggests to me that this spell is mainly meant to be used during the laning phase, placing the buff on a creep that's low health in order to deter the enemy from getting the last hit. I can't imagine how you'd use this spell during a team fight. Maybe you can punish an enemy who gets a kill on one of your allies, but it's more likely that you would throw this spell around to take advantage of Fatal Attraction to make the enemy team stutter repeatedly. Now, I know what you want to ask. Dennis, does this ability affect buildings? Yes, it certainly does. The building won't get stunned, cause you know, it's a building, but it does take the damage from last hitting a creep with the buff on, although it's reduced to about 100 damage. It's still the weakest of his spells, but I think there's enough going on to make it useful and fun. His second ability is Reality Shift, and it's awesome. This places down a ward with a fairly small radius that lasts for 10 seconds. Any enemy unit within the radius will turn ethereal, which is also why I put Ghost Revenant first in the video, to establish what ethereal is. That's a little teaching trick for ya. This is a strong anti-melee spell, since melee heroes can't get rid of the ward on their own, so placing this down on a creep wave is a good way to mess up the enemy's last hits. In teamfight scenarios, you would focus on a hero that you'd want to disarm, place this spell on top of them, and use your other spells to pull them in with Fatal Attraction, hopefully making them useless enough so that your team can handle the others. Furthermore, the additional magic damage from turning enemies ethereal will amplify the damage from Fatal Attraction, as well as anything else Edgewalker's got going on. Case in point, the Edgewalker's ultimate is Haunting Echoes. This allows him to have up to 3 wisps at any given time, with a recharge time of 20 seconds per wisp. You can think of them as ammunition, as the Edgewalker can throw a wisp to a target location, dealing 200 magic damage, and silencing enemies in a small AoE for 2 seconds. Like I was alluding to earlier, you can use these orbs in combination with Fatal Attraction to continuously pull enemies towards you, and with the additional damage from Fatal Attraction and Reality Shift, this spell hurts a lot more than you'd think. Edgewalker has a lot going on for him in terms of utility and overall uniqueness. The position-based gameplay is really inventive, and I can picture myself having fun zipping around and displacing enemies ever so slightly to piss them off. Reality Shift would take some careful planning, since you could potentially save an enemy from getting pummeled with auto attacks. But all that aside, Edgewalker is a really cool design, and I hope we can get some form of him in Dota 2. We just gotta change that name to something a little more tolerable, like Francis. Yeah, whew, that's way better than Edgewalker. Jeez. And there you have it, yet another group of heroes lost in Dota's history. If you're anything like me, I'm sure there's a lot of theory crafting going on in your head too. So I gotta know, who was your favorite hero? Who would you like to see in Dota 2? How would you change the heroes to make them more viable? Let your voice be heard. Anywho, please follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. Join the $5 tier on Patreon to vote for future episodes on the channel. And could they really have not come up with a better name than Edgewalker? See you soon.